Good afternoon. On behalf of our host, the San Jose Clinic Advisory Board, welcome and thank you for joining us for the 11th Annual Fall Speaker Series, presented virtually from St. Anne Catholic Church. I'm Lisa Molosky, and I'm honored to be here once again as your virtual MC. We had hoped to see you in person this year, but with the uncertainty that 2021 has brought, we wanted everyone to stay safe and enjoy our presentation free of worry. As we have seen in the past 19 months, a global pandemic is not just a medical issue. Today's discussion will focus on the idea that science, healthcare, and policy are intertwined more than we realized. Before we continue, it is my pleasure to introduce Auxiliary Bishop Italo Deloro of the Archdiocese of Galveston, Houston, who will deliver our invocation. Bishop?
Thank you, Lisa. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. All good Father, whose will it is to reach out to all of your created world, and through Jesus, your Son, and his disciples, to bring the good news of salvation to all, we thank you for bringing us together today as we begin the celebration of the 100th year of life of San Jose Clinic. Almighty Father, awaken us the awareness of the presence of your Holy Spirit so that we may enjoy and benefit from today's program. Enlighten the minds of the speakers and open our minds so that you may speak to and through us and we can hear you. All merciful Father, sustain us in our discipleship of your Son Jesus, especially through the wonderful works of San Jose Clinic, as it brings the soothing and healing power of your mercy to so many disadvantaged people in the city of Houston. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Bishop Italo. Now it is my honor to introduce Maureen Sanders, President and CEO of San Jose Clinic. Maureen?
Thank you, Lisa. On behalf of San Jose Clinic, Phil Morabito, CEO, Pierpont Communications, and Chair of our Advisory Board, and Katherine Mitchell, President, West Region of Prospero Health, and this year's event chair, I would like to thank everyone for being with us today. For the past 10 years, the Advisory Board has hosted Fall Speaker Series in order to start a community conversation about important topics in healthcare. Today, we will be examining the nexus of science, healthcare, and policy. We hope through events such as today's program, you will recognize that each of us can become an advocate for providing access to quality healthcare for all the uninsured in our region. Now I would like to introduce Katherine Mitchell, this year's event chair. Katherine has served as a San Jose Clinic board member since 2019. We thank her for her leadership and support of this event. Katherine?
Thank you, Maureen. I'm honored to serve as the chair of this year's 11th Annual Fall Speaker Series. Support for this event directly impacts the care that San Jose Clinic provides at both locations, Midtown and Fort Bend. As a board member of San Jose Clinic, I recognize that the clinic has existed for 99 years because of the support of both donors and the medical community. I would like to give a big thank you to the medical community and for all of our wonderful sponsors, with a special thanks to our title sponsor, St. Luke's Health, who has supported this event since 2013. Their partnership with San Jose Clinic is unmatched and extends beyond our event, and for that we are truly grateful. St. Luke's Health helps ensure our clients have access to the best in healthcare, and that of course includes great dental care. Dr. Doug Lawson, CEO of St. Luke's Health, is with us today. Welcome, Doug. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Katherine. It's an honor to support the 11th Annual Fall Speaker Series for San Jose Clinic. St. Luke's not only has a strong partnership with the clinic, we also have a shared mission and set of values. We work together on many levels across our community, and we are always proud to be aligned with San Jose Clinic and the great work they do providing quality, affordable health care to the uninsured. I did not know that a year ago when I addressed this audience that we would still be virtual in 21. But San Jose Clinic and St. Luke's have met the challenge of the past 19 months head on. As partners in the Texas Medical Center and as stewards of our shared faith. We look forward to continuing our partnership as San Jose Clinic moves into its centennial year in 2022. We know you will benefit from today's program, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Doug, on behalf of everyone at San Jose Clinic. Now I would like to welcome our distinguished speakers. First, our moderator, David Leebron, president of Rice University. President Lebron has served at Rice since 2004. He's a native of Philadelphia, a graduate of Harvard and Harvard Law. He taught at UCLA Law School, NYU School of Law, and at Columbia Law, where he was appointed dean and served until coming to Houston and Rice University. Our featured speaker is Dr. Stephen M Hahn, who has recently taken on a new role as Chief Medical Officer of Preemptive Health and Health Security, a new initiative launched by Flagship Pioneering, a life sciences venture firm that incubates and curates biopharma companies. He previously served as the 24th Commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration. And prior to joining the FDA, Dr. Hahn was the Chief Medical Executive at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. President Lebron, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm so glad to be here today in support of the San Jose Clinic. It's just such a fabulous organization. And Dr. Hahn, it's great to be with you again. I hope you've been well since you left the commission in January, and it's just great to have you here and be with you again.
Well, President Lebron, it's an honor to be here with you, my alma mater, Rice University, and also to honor and celebrate the San Jose Clinic. Nothing more important than how we take care of those who really need the most care possible.
Well, to get us started, as a former commissioner of the FDA, you had quite a run and experience dealing with a once-in-a-century kind of pandemic, and we hope it'll continue to be
Yes.
once in a century. But tell us a little bit about that experience. What was it like to be commissioner during the pandemic?
So when I started in Washington, D.C. as Commissioner of Food and Drugs, I thought the big issues were going to be cigarettes, tobacco, youth vaping, the opioid crisis, which of course are still issues in the country, and the fast approval of cancer drugs, cardiovascular drugs, et cetera. But of course what came upon us was the identification of COVID, the outbreak in Wuhan, China, and then coming to our shores as well as to Europe. So we really decided early on that we had to address in a very robust way how we were going to deal with requests to approve or authorize drugs, devices, et cetera. And of course, there were a number of things that came to us, right? It was initially diagnostic tests, so we had to have a test for COVID. Then there was personal protective equipment when we learned that the transmission was spread in a similar way to flu and other viruses. And then therapeutics and ultimately vaccines. So we planned early on to base all of our decision-making upon the science and the data. Where would that lead us? And we prioritized because, as you can imagine, we had a lot of work during that time. Same number of people, but it doubled our workload. And I think it's important to remember the FDA regulates 20% of consumer GDP spending in the United States. And so it's not just food, it's also a lot of health products that we use, that doctors prescribe, et cetera. So we basically prioritized based upon what we thought was the best science out there. And we did a lot of things to try to speed up, the process of authorization. Congress had given the agency this power called EUA, or Emergency Use Authorization, which is now part of the lexicon of the United States, interestingly enough. And that really allows us to expedite the approval of products. But two major observations that I want to highlight. One is the incredible importance of science, basic science to start with, but then also how the private sector takes that science and actually commercialize it and implements it. If we did not have both the scientific basis, we have great universities like Rice University, and also a robust private sector, we wouldn't have had vaccines in 11 months, which really is a historic event. And then the other thing that I think is really important is we learned once again that we need to do a much better job of those who are disenfranchised and those who are underserved. Ironically enough, in my tenure at the agency, spent a lot of time talking to groups that represented those who are underserved. And they who really need innovation in new medical products are those often who are the least trustful of the system. And we just have to do a better job there.
Well, those are great insights, a wonderful place to begin. And I want to maybe drill down on some of these. One that you actually mentioned was the remarkable speed. And I'm not sure people fully appreciate what an extraordinary scientific achievement. And I remember very well at the beginning of all of this when we were told how long it would take to get a vaccine. And, really this became kind of a factor in the United States really in February and March. And really, I think before the beginning of 2021, we started to hear about the vaccines that would be very soon available. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more, because it's really important the public understand the science, not as scientists, but understand the achievement not just of getting the vaccines, but getting reliable and safe vaccines.
Absolutely, President Lebron, and I think you've really hit the nail on the head here in that it was an extraordinary effort. The sequence, the genes of the virus were identified in January. And 11 months later, there's two vaccines that are basically authorized. Now, not full approval, but a lot of data going into that. And I think the point you're making is really a good one in that it showed that we could do something remarkable like this. And what I told the American people during my tenure, and I'll tell you again, none of the steps that we would normally go through in a vaccine development were skipped in the development of these vaccines. It was
Could you repeat that sentence again,
yes.
please?
None of the steps that are normally used for approval or authorization of a vaccine in normal times were skipped. So I think the remarkable part of that is that we could do it in 11 months. But President Lebron, I think this is something that we could repeat. And the previous kind of fastest time that a vaccine was approved was 4 years. And that got compressed to 11 months. So maybe it won't always be 11 months, but we could really do this in this record time. And there are a lot of reasons that went into it. We had basic science from great universities that had been funded by the NIH and others, National Science Foundation, that allowed us to have that foundation. If that foundation weren't there, we wouldn't have been able to build on that. We had companies who stepped up to the plate and put money and resources at risk. We had the federal government, Operation Warp Speed, $10 billion, which I believe will go down in history as an incredibly worthwhile investment. And then we had the regulatory side of things and the medical side of things, where we really cut the red tape and allowed for what we'll call rolling reviews. That is a constant interaction with the developers, with the we call them sponsors, but the private sector. And I think the combination of those things, if we could bottle that up and do that again, we could see really superb expediting of innovative health products for everybody around the world. It was really just it was a medical grand slam. It was pretty remarkable.
Well, it's one of the privileges of leading a great research university is you sort of have a front row seat to seeing how the faculty responds to that. And frankly, whether it's a hurricane here or a crisis for migrants and refugees or a big scientific crisis as the pandemic presented, that is, can we produce something that first will help diagnose the disease and then treat it or cure it or prevent it, but then also look at issues about, what are the disparate impacts? And so at a university like Rice, it wasn't just the bioengineers and the scientists, it was also folks in the humanities and the social scientists, all trying to figure out how could we better understand the disease? How could we better prevent the disease? And you just spoke in your answer about the partnerships. And of course, what our faculty wants to be able to do is make a contribution to solving this pandemic. We had one faculty member who produced her own kind of special test that we're now using actually on the campus, and for us that's also helped lower the costs a little bit. And we got faculty members really beginning to delve into some of the consequences on disparate parts of the population, and we'll come back to that. But can you again drill a little deeper, because as you said, it's so fundamental to our success in this country these partnerships. And I'm not sure everybody quite understands that. About how did you think about putting these together and making them work? Was it just everybody was all prepared for that and stepping forward? What are the essential elements of that system that in some ways make the American system relatively unique? I'll end with a little quip that I once heard about the American university system, which is the great strength about the American university system is that there is no system.
Right.
And yet these partnerships lie as one of the foundations of the success that you had.
Well, I think, really good points. And just to emphasize one thing, it's not just about the biology and the bioengineering. The social sciences are so important because what we needed to understand in real time was how behavior, living conditions, work conditions affected the transmission of this virus. And you don't get that from a test tube. You get that from understanding people and where they live and their lives and the conditions under which they live, which have become so important, I think, as we think about further responding to COVID. So this was a historic set of partnerships, and it really was sort of all of the globe response, but particularly the U.S. And what you saw was the private sector, so companies. You saw educational institutions. You saw the NIH. You saw other parts of the government come forward. So, for example, probably little known here, we had to break down the barrier of having companies cooperate with each other because we needed them. There were components of certain, therapies, vaccines here versus there. And, we have rules against collaboration across lines because of antitrust laws. And the suspension of some of those laws was enabling, as was the Operation Warp Speed money, as was the great response from our basic science and universities. So that really came together organically. I think we could make that less organic and more institutionalized, and we probably should do that. But it did come together, and I think it's what allowed us to get these tests that you developed and the personal protective equipment and therapeutics and vaccines. So I'm now at Flagship Pioneering, as was mentioned, and that's what's called a venture innovation firm. We start our own companies, and the reason I joined them was because of my recognition that the private sector was so important last year and really felt that enabling the private sector and innovation was so important. But one of the things that we're doing, and I think it relates to what you're saying, is that we're involved in an effort called preemptive medicine and health security, which is all about, can we, with health security, if the government spends a lot of money on our personal security and the defense of the country, shouldn't we be thinking about investments in how to provide health security? And that's not just building a health shield, which is one of the things we're looking at, using AI and ML to predict what are the next variants of concern for Delta, and then, okay, let's develop therapeutics and vaccines for those. That's a really important part of that, but other pathogens as well. But also the chronic diseases that afflict the country, diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, cancer. Can we identify those early? And can we transform the health system into a wellness health system instead of a sick care health system? We're coming to a cliff from an economic point of view in terms of how much we spend on healthcare. And a lot of countries are at that place. And one of the ways to get around that is to identify disease early, to identify interventions that can really help people stay well. So I'm really excited about that, but I think that's part and parcel of what this is, because what's that going to take? It's going to take policy changes at the government level. It's going to take investment from the U.S. government. It's going to take research from great universities like Rice University, and it's going to take the private sector to commercialize. And I'm glad we have all those commitments in our country, because I would be relatively pessimistic about it if we didn't.
Well, I can't resist sort of pursuing a little bit more one thing you mentioned, which is, about the sort of implications for the future of the success that we saw and the special rules we adopted, and really ask, how do we best sustain that? Because as you just described, this can't just be something we do during a pandemic, right? This is a systemic problem of how we improve healthcare, how we improve its efficiency? Are there things you'd like to see or something you'd recommend to university presidents or others about how we build these better partnerships and bring a more constant success and attention to the really serious health care challenges we face, both systemically and to so many parts of our population?
There's no question about that, and it is an urgent, I feel like it's a moral imperative for us to address this, and you said it beautifully. We all need to come together. Now, we live in pretty divided times, but I hope that one thing we can all get around and come together on is the remarkable success of what happened and how we have to all be in this together. So why shouldn't university presidents, why shouldn't people in the private sector, why shouldn't other entities come together, the San Jose Clinic, come together and say, we really need to form a consortium, a group, or whatever, to enable the policy changes, to enable the structural changes that need to take place, and not only to expedite innovation, because as you know, there's a revolution out there in biomedicine. I mean, just the things that are happening now, we couldn't have imagined even 10 years ago. We need to accelerate that so that less people suffer. But the other part of this is we have to put the same focus, attention, and resources on healthcare disparities, because it is a problem across the globe, and we need to really take care of folks who are the most vulnerable. And I don't think that can be just a government response. I think we all have to take responsibility for that.
You know, this was really a true moonshot in terms of its, not only its success, but the shortness of the period of that success. And of course, I'm sure you know, President Kennedy came to Rice University in 1962 and gave this remarkable speech about how could we do all these things. And at that point, really, he was saying, how can we do them all within 8 years? That we sent somebody to the moon. And one of his key lines, of course, was, we must be bold. And clearly that's what happened here. People were really bold about, but as you said before, really making sure that we still did all of the things that science and healthcare demand. I want to return to another thing you kind of mentioned earlier, which was the disparities. And I think this has made the pandemic really kind of rip the lid off a little bit, made much more visible the health disparities that we see across the country for a variety of reasons, and maybe especially in the Hispanic community and the Black community. We saw the impacts of this disease were really quite different and much more severe in some cases than to other parts of the population. You know, how can we kind of bring together, you know, science and healthcare and public policy more effectively to understand these problems and to take the measures that will really bring greater equality and equity to our society, particularly as concerns something as fundamental to opportunity for people as their health?
No question, and it is fundamental. You're absolutely right, President Lebron, and I think it's very much married to what we just discussed, and that is bringing the partnerships and the focus on advancing innovation, but also making sure that it's available for everyone. One of the things I liked about going to the firm that I went to was that it was very much top of mind. Health security and preemptive medicine has to be there for everybody. And if we haven't learned that from COVID, then we're not going to learn the lessons we need to learn. So a couple things. One is, I think there are ways that and it'll take changes in legislation and regulatory framework, but there are ways that we can incent the private sector to develop and innovate and make sure that it is available for everyone. So you could imagine there are pathways now to expedite innovations in cancer, et cetera. So if there were these incentives for the private sector to develop programs specifically for making sure that there is inclusion of the underserved, not just in who gets it when it's approved, but who's involved in the development of the product. Because the other part of this is the suspicion that many have of big science, big medicine, big universities, big government. I mean, we saw that just highlighted over the last year. And I think, I'm hoping that people will look at what happened with Operation Warp Speed and see that when good people come together and really try to do their best for folks, that good things can come out of that. But we all have to make that effort to help people overcome the distrust that's out there. But I think we can. So I spoke about regulatory framework, but I think there's other things that could be done that we could all partner with. San Jose Clinic's a perfect example. How can San Jose Clinic be involved in the development of innovation, educate people about what clinical trials are all about, and what the scientific process is and how it can really help the human condition and keep people out of trouble medically.
So let's drill a little bit more there, because we are here to celebrate San Jose Clinic, and really just a remarkable history, about to celebrate its 100th anniversary. How do you see their role? I mean, clearly they're a place where we can learn things about these different populations, given the population that they're so dedicated to serving. But how should we think of them in the future if there's another pandemic or in other health contexts? How do you see their role and other institutions like them in addressing these broader issues in our society?
Well, I think the San Jose Clinic has been so successful and play a key role in delivering health care to people who desperately need it. And just to be congratulated on their mission, but also, on the nearly 100 years of doing this day in and day out. And we know that can't be easy, but they do it, and they do it with love and dedication, and it's really just terrific to see. I think what I would say is that organizations like the San Jose Clinic have to be supported, and have to be supported in almost every way that you can think about it, financially for sure, but also supported from great universities and from private industry, and that is engaging. Because what the San Jose Clinic does is provides care, but the way it is when you see a doctor. You go to a doctor often because you trust that doctor, and you trust what they're gonna say. There's gonna be plain speaking, you're gonna have communication. Acknowledging that in underserved communities there's mistrust, and for good reasons, historically, but that we will take care of you, and we will have a conversation and treat you with respect. I think that's a vital role for the San Jose Clinic. So could the San Jose Clinic partner with private sector, FDA, whoever, and describe, this is why it took 11 months for a vaccine. This is what we did. These are the steps we didn't skip. Do it in plain language, just like I would do sitting in a room with a patient, treating him with respect as an adult, allowing them to have autonomy and make decisions, but at the same time having those conversations. It's a key bridge to reaching the people, and it'll be person-to-person contact. We can do it. There's no question about it.
So as you know, Rice University celebrated its own centennial not too long ago in 2012. And of course, one of the things you do in that context is, try to think long-term about the next 100 years, about how you're thinking about your strategy. So if there was one kind of piece of advice you were going to give this great institution, the San Jose Clinic, as it thinks about its future for maybe not the next 100 years, that's a little far, but certainly the next 10, 20, 30 years, what would you say to them?
I would say be out there talking about the need, talking about the issues that affect health and well-being in these communities. I would say partner with great universities, but partner with the private sector. Let's engage government. Let's be advocates for those who need it. And let's educate our constituents about science and data and medicine, and get them to a place where we can have everyone, getting these innovative products as quickly as possible. And I think San Jose Clinic is in a perfect position to do that.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hahn. It's been great to be with you. And I don't have to say it, but I hope you know how proud we are at Rice University to have you as one of our graduates who's made such a remarkable contribution to the world. We're just really very proud and grateful for that. On behalf of both of us, I hope this conversation has been informative and enjoyable and productive for everyone. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you, President Lebron. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Hahn and President Leebron. We so appreciate your time and insight about these very important topics. Now, once again, Maureen Sanders and Katherine Mitchell for the presentation of this year's Groundbreaker Award. Maureen.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you to Dr. Hahn and President Lebron. We are honored to have such distinguished individuals join us today. We would now like to take a few minutes to recognize someone who's very special to San Jose Clinic and a deserving honoree of our third annual Groundbreaker Award. This year's award goes to Phil Morabito, CEO of Pierpont Communications, Chair of San Jose Clinic's Advisory Board, and the original creator and innovator of the Fall Speaker Series. Phil has been an ardent advocate and supporter of the clinic for more than 15 years. He is an inaugural member of the Bishop Dubois Lifetime Giving Society and consistently gives his time and effort to the clinic's initiatives, including our Back to School event and Patient Christmas Party, which provides school supplies and Christmas presents for the children of our clinic.
Phil's vision for San Jose Clinic and this event have led us here today to the 11th annual event featuring relevant topics and renowned speakers in the healthcare industry. Thank you, Phil, for your leadership as chair of the advisory board and for being a steadfast supporter of the clinic's mission.
Well, thank you so much for this award. I'm very excited. It's quite an honor. And I've been involved in the San Jose Clinic for a long time, and it is among my favorite charities to support. And that's because they make such a difference in the community and affect so many people's lives. It's very, very moving to see what they do, and I'm honored to receive this award here today. I created this Fall Speaker Series about 10 some odd years ago because we wanted to create a venue where we could introduce people to the clinic and embellish the support that we get from others. So I encourage all of you here today that are first time being exposed to the clinic to join me in supporting the clinic. And those of you that are longtime supporters to the clinic, up your contribution because this clinic makes a difference that everyone can believe in.
Thank you, Phil, for showing us what leadership is and for your unwavering support of San Jose Clinic. What an amazing presentation today. We hope you enjoyed the program. For our closing remarks and a blessing, let's send it back to Bishop Italo. Bishop?
Thank you. It has been an honor for me to be here with you today. And thank you to San Jose Clinic for being such a wonderful community asset for 99 years. The mission becomes even more important now as the clinic moves into its centennial year. 2022 is going to be a year of Thanksgiving for patients, volunteers, staff, and donors alike. The clinic carries on the faith and values of the Catholic Church through their compassion and respect for every patient. Monsignor George T. Walsh, founder of San Jose Clinic, had a deep and abiding interest in education and social welfare causes. I hope you will join me today in reflecting on his vision to protect our community's health, particularly those who are so often left behind. On your screen, you will see that you can text to support San Jose Clinic and their mission. Please take a reflective moment right now to make a difference in lives of those who place their trust in San Jose Clinic for now and the next 100 years.
Thank you, Bishop Italo, for that very important appeal. Our text to give information is still on your screen. Once again, thank you for supporting the efforts of San Jose Clinic. A special thanks to the St. Anne Catholic community for allowing us to film here on campus. We hope to see you again next year for our centennial celebration. 2022 will be a full year of history and happenings to recognize 100 years of San Jose Clinic and service to the community. Here's to San Jose Clinic and the mission of forever healing. Thank you again for joining us.